In the previous video, we have learned about the portfolio investment whereby we try to combine few assets in different proportion and we put it in one portfolio or one investment. So the reason why we want to invest in a portfolio because we can reduce the risk by diversify our investment. So now we are going to look at the efficient sets for two assets or efficient sets for combinations of assets. In the real world, there is an infinite number of choice of portfolio that can be created. You can choose either to combine 50% in stock A plus with another 50% in stock B, or you can do like a combination of 70% of stock A plus 30% of stock B, or you can choose to invest 10% in 10 different stocks. Okay, for example, here is the expected return and SD for different portfolio with different component. First choice, I have 100% money invested in stock A. So this one is not a portfolio since we only invest in one stock. Another one, here we have 100% of money to be invested in stock B. This is the expected return and standard deviations. Now we have portfolio number 1 whereby we combine 90% invested in stock A plus 10% of the money we invest in stock B. Portfolio number 2 is a half combination. It is an equal combinations, 50% in stock A and another 50% in stock B. And the third portfolio here, I have 10% to be invested in stock A plus 90% to be invested in stock B. As you can see here, each combination of stock or each portfolio will have different expected return and also different risk, the SD here. If we are going to illustrate the combination of asset from previous slides into a diagram, we can see it as in this slide. So for y-axis, we have here is expected return, and for x-axis, this one is the symbol for standard deviations, which mean this is you punya risk. Okay, so if I just want to invest all my money in stock A, I will get the point here. So the expected return is 25.89%. While on the other hand, if I invest all my money in stock B, I will expect to get return of 5.5% and the SD of 11.5%. And this one, another point is I plot the portfolio number 1 here, portfolio number 2, and also portfolio number 3. From this diagram, we can learn few things with regard to the efficient sets for two assets, which I will explain in details in coming slide. Okay, the first thing that we can learn from this diagram is about diversification effect. So we know that diversification occurs wherever the correlation between two securities is below 1. So before this, we have learned that we suggest to investors to diversify their investment, not to put all your money in just one individual asset. You need to diversify in order for you to minimize the risk. Another thing is that when you want to combine your investment or you want to invest in a portfolio, you are suggested to choose or combine two assets which is negatively related to each other. So we want the correlation between the two securities to be below 1. So here, if the correlation equals to 1, which is perfect positive correlation, you're going to have the straight line here. So the relationship will be like a very straight line, this one here, if the correlation equals to 1. But if the correlation is less than 1, we are going to have a curved line. So this one, we see that the correlation between stock A and stock B, we do not have a straight line, but we have a curve here. So the blue curve, that one, because of correlation between stock A and stock B is less than 1. It's because before this we have calculated the correlation between stock A and stock B, we get something like negative 0 point something. I cannot remember that. You can revisit our exercise before this. Just here, to what I want to highlight is that why do we have a curved line here? Because of the correlation is less than 1. So if our curve is skewed to the left, it will always be to the left of the straight line, meaning that we can reduce the risk, because the x-axis here indicates the or measure the risk, because this one SD symbolize the risk for the investment. So if you can like bring your SD to the left, meaning that you can reduce the risk. So here we can say that diversification reduces the risk for the investment in a portfolio. Second thing that we can learn from this diagram is about minimum variance. So here I have a MV point. So this one here. The point MV represents the minimum variance of portfolio. So when the variance is the minimum as well as the standard deviation, meaning that our risk is at the lowest one. This is the portfolio with the lowest possible risk, this one. By definition, this portfolio must also have the lowest possible standard deviation. So here we can say that if we do the combination for stock A and stock B, the minimum variance or minimum standard deviation, we can just only get up until this point. We cannot get to reduce up to 0 here. This is the minimum risk that you have to bear if you were to combine your investment in a stock A and your stock B. Next, let's look at the opportunity of feasible set. The curved line in the figure represents an opportunity set of feasible set. So here, from stock A, stock B to stock A here, it represents any opportunity that an investor can choose to invest. An individual contemplating an investment in the portfolio faces an opportunity set. So if you want to invest, you can choose any point along this curve. You can do 65% in A plus 35% in B, or the other way around. Any point along this curve are your opportunity set. An investor is neither can choose any point above nor below the curve line. So if you want to choose the point under this line or over this curve line, this is not possible because these two lines here is not lying around the curve here. It is not on the opportunity or feasible side. Investors only can choose the point along this curve only. Last thing that we can learn from this diagram is about efficient set or frontier set. So here it is, you can clearly see that no investors would want to hold a portfolio with an expected return below that of the minimum variance portfolio. So here this one we have minimum variance portfolio. Here is the lowest risk that we need to bear for our investment. For example, here no investors would choose portfolio 1. So here is portfolio 1. Why it says that no investors will choose portfolio 1? Because for portfolio 1, the risk is bigger than the minimum variance, while the return here, expected return, is lower than the minimum variance here. This portfolio has less expected return, so expected return here is lesser compared to this one here, but more SD, this one here, as compared to minimum portfolio. Takkan kita nak pilih investment yang berisiko besar atau berisiko tinggi, tapi pulangan dia, return dia lagi rendah. Though the entire curve from, this one is the curve from A to B is called the feasible set. So we know that the curve here, along the curve here is the feasible set. Investors can choose any point along this curve. Investors only consider the curve between MV to A. So the efficient sets actually is starting from here to A. Okay, even though we have opportunity set from B to A, the efficient set, investment choice or investment option which is considered to be efficient is only starting from MV point here, this one here, up until stop A only. So this one is not. Okay, yeah, this one. So from MV to point A only. This one we call it as efficient set or frontier set. We are done with the efficient sets for two assets. Now we move to diversification and portfolio risk. We know before this we have discussed, I have already explained several times to you that diversification can substantially reduce the variability of return without an equivalent reductions in expected return. It is a good thing to diversify your investment, to invest in more than one asset, because by diversifying you can reduce the risk without the reduction in the expected return. This reduction in risk arises because why diversification can reduce risk? Because worse than expected return from one asset are offset by better than expected returns from another. So this is why diversification can reduce the risk. Maybe you expect stock A to increase a bit and stock B price to increase this one. However, the decrease in price for stock B this can be offset by a decrease in price for stock B. So this is how diversification works. However, there is a minimum level of risk that cannot be diversified away, and that is the systematic portion. So here, how well you diversify your investment, you still cannot make it like zero risk. There is always a fixed portion, or we call it as a systematic risk. So here we illustrate in this diagram. This one is standard deviation, meaning that this one is risk, and N here is number of asset. The more number of asset you try to diversify, you can see that your risk will decrease. Okay, lagi banyak aset yang you cuba combine dalam portfolio, risiko untuk pelaburan tu akan semakin berkurang. The curve here will keep decreasing up until one point here. So dia tak boleh turun terus sampai zero. Dia akan turun sampai satu tahap sahaja dan dia akan jadi static. Stagnan je sampai bila-bila. Here, we call it as a systematic risk or systematic portion, which means that the risk that cannot be eliminated by diversification. We can say that in a large portfolio, in a well-diversified portfolio, we can reduce the unsystematic risk, but we cannot eliminate the systematic risk. Diversification can only reduce risk. Dia hanya boleh kurangkan sahaja risk, tapi tak boleh hilangkan. Cannot eliminate risk. Okey, kepelbagaian dalam pelaburan hanya akan mengurangkan risiko, tapi ada satu portion of risk that investors need to bear, which is the systematic portion. You takkan dapat pelaburan yang zero risk. Memang ada some risk that need to be bear by the investors. Now let's look at the difference between two types of risk. First one, we have systematic risk. It is a risk factors that affect a large number of assets, also known as non-diversifiable risk or market risk. Example for systematic risk are GDP, gross domestic product, inflation, interest rate, and etc. If there are changes in these, like for example, there is increase in inflation rate, the whole market, or it will affect large number of assets. On the other hand, for unsystematic risk, it is a risk factors that affect a limited number of assets. The risk only will give effect to certain assets. It is also known as unique risk and asset-specific risk. For example, labor strikes, part shortages, and etc. Okay, so to give you a clear example, maybe company A is having a problem. They are having a problem with their labor. So there are labor strike, and the media is reporting that this company is having problem, resulting in the price for stock for this company stock price to reduce because of the negative news with regard to company A. What happened to the stock price for company B, C or D? Nothing happened here because the risk factor only related to company A. It is a unique risk or asset specific risk. So it is different with a systematic risk because like for example here tadi inflation, bila inflation naik, the increase in the inflation rate will affect most or majority of the stock in the market. So company A, company B, C, D sampai Z pun will be affected when the inflation rate changes. So here are the example of systematic and unsystematic risk. This one for unsystematic risk, how to reduce? We can reduce by diversification. Do not just invest in one asset. Do not put all your eggs in one basket. You need to combine or you need to invest in more than one asset. However, here this systematic risk we cannot do anything about that. We just have to bear with it. How well you diversify your portfolio pun, you tak boleh eliminate the systematic risk. Dia memang akan sentiasa ada in the market. From the slide before, we know that systematic risk and plus unsystematic risk will form a total risk. For a portfolio, the total risk including the systematic portion plus the unsystematic portion of risk. For a well-diversified portfolio, unsystematic risk is very small. Since you invest in more than one asset, you invest in many assets, the unsystematic risk for a well-diversified portfolio will equals to 0. Consequently, the total risk for a diversified portfolio is essentially equivalent to only systematic risk. Dalam satu portfolio yang sangat diversified, total risk here hanyalah systematic risk sahaja, since the unsystematic risk, this one is 0. Dia tak ada this part. Semua dah di reduce by diversification. Yang tinggal hanyalah systematic portion. Ini situasi dalam satu portfolio yang very well diversified.